Gopijanavalabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopijanavalabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Raja Janarandana Yashodanandana Raja Janarandana Nativa Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Gopijanavalabha Girivaradhari Gopijanavalabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Raja Janarandana Yashodanandana Raja Janarandana Nativa Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Madhava Kunjavihari Jaya Radha Madhava Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Radha. Jaya Radha Samasundara Samasundara. Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Prabhupada. Nitya Hare Baba, Abhachan Bhakti Swami Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Iskan Pavachari Divange Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Yoga Vishnu Paramhamsa Parivachikacharya Sutra Sudashi Shri Divange Shri Bhakti Swami Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Anand Puri Vaishnava ki jai, Namacha Shri Viras Thakur ki jai, Prince Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Gaura Bhaktan Ki Jai, Shri Shiva Hare Krishna Gopal Shyam Radha Kunj Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Navadip Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Yamuna Mai Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Samaved Bhaktavan Ki Jai, Gandharaj Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai, Nitai Gopavanande. All glories to the simple devotees. All glories to the simple devotees. All glories to the simple devotees. All glories, Shri Guru and Shri Guranga. All glories to the Bhagavad Gita.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees, welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 1, verses 1 to 3. We'd like to thank everyone for their attendance. Just a sound check. Everyone can hear me? Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. So we will start by reciting the Mangal Charan prayers, glorification of Srimad Bhagavatam, and then we will also recite some important verses from the first canto. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Tam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavinebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Sarvashastra Sarva Vedeka Satphala Sarva Siddhantaratnadya Sarva Lokai Prada Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabhu Kali Dando Didatitya Shri Krishna Parivartita O Srimad Bhagavatam, O nectar churned from the ocean of all Vedic scriptures, O most prominent transcendental fruit of all the Vedas, O you are enriched with the jewels of all spiritual philosophical conclusions. O you grant spiritual vision to all the people of the world. O life breath of the Vaishnava devotees. O Lord, you are the sun which has arisen to dispel the darkness of Kali Yuga. You are actually Lord Krishna who has returned among us. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varsha Sharyarite Sarvada Sarva Sevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namastute. O Srimad Bhagavatam, I offer my respectful obeisance unto you. By reading you one attains transcendental bliss. For your syllables rain pure love of God upon the reader. You are always to be served by everyone, for you are incarnation of Lord Krishna. Mad ekabando mad sangim mad guru mad mahadana mad nishtaraka mad bhagya mad ananda namastute. O Srimad Bhagavatam, O my friend, O my only friend, O my companion, O my teacher, O my great wealth, O my deliverer, O my good fortune, O my bliss, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Asadu sadhu tadain atini chochataraka hanamuncha kada chinmam premna ritkatayo spura. O Srimad Bhagavatam, O give us saintliness to the unsaintly, O uplift the very fallen. Please do not ever leave me. please become manifest upon my heart and my throat, accompanied by pure love of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So now we'll go over some verses. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadyasya Yatonvayaditaratas Charte Subhignaswarat Tene Brahma Hidaya Adikavaye Muyanti Yatsuraya Tejo Varimridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mrisha Damna Swena Sada Nirastakuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi. O my Lord Shri Krishna, Son of Vasudev, all-pervading personality of Godhead, offer my respectful obeisance unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primal cause of all causes of creation, of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, as one is bewildered by the illusory representation of water seen in fire or land seen on water. Only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reaction of the three modes of nature, appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Sri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representation of material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Prayanalpayusha sabya kalavasmin yuge jana manda samanda mun matayo manda bhagya upadrita. O learned one, in this iron age of Kali, men have but short lives. They are quarrelsome, lazy, misguided, and unlucky, and above all, always disturbed. Narayan namaskritya narachaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udirayet. By reciting the Srimad, before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisance unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Naranarayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Savai pumso paro dharmo yato bhaktir adokshaje ahayutukiya pratihata yayatma suprasiddhati. The supreme occupation, dharma, for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendental Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoge Prayojita Janayatyo Yatyasu Vairagyam Jnanam Chayat Ahitukam. By rendering devotional service unto the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. Vadanti tattvasvidas tattvam yajnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti sabhyate. Learned transcendentals who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma or Bhagavan. Shushrushroshradhanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi Syanmahatsevaya Vipra Punyatirtha Nishevanat. O twice born sages, by serving those devotees who are completely free from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva. Shrannutam swakata Krishna punya shravana kirtana hridyantastoya bhadrani vidunati shurichatam. Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma, Supersoul in everyone's heart, and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses the desire of for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtues when properly heard and chanted. Nastraparayashu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in the classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotees, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So we are covering Srimad Bhagavatam based on the teachings of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Conscious. So we're going to cover some feedback from last week, and then we'll go into today's Srimad Bhagavatam lesson from Canto 1, verses 1 to 3. So last week we covered the introduction, and I'd like you either to type in the chat or you can unmute and share with us what did you take to heart last week from last week's lessons, something that you found very interesting, amazing, really touched your heart, something that you learned. Please share with us. Any gems that you can take away, that you took away from last week's lesson, and those of you that are on YouTube, you can also type in the chat. I hope you took something away. Am I audible? Mother Atma Darshani said, I've learned that we should not try to understand Srimad Bhagavatam by our intelligence since it blocks us. We should simply hear and try to absorb. Yes, that is one form of hearing, associating with Bhagavatam, but we should also use our intelligence, just like Mahaprasad. Krishna appears as Mahaprasad. And what do you do with Mahaprasad? You don't just look at it. You honor it. You respect it. Right? Krishna appears as the holy name. What do you do with the holy name? You hear it. So Bhagavatam comes in the form of knowledge, transcendental knowledge. Therefore, we have to use our intelligence. And today we will touch on that as well. But we should also not allow the intelligence to be an obstacle. So we should do both. Mother Archana Siddhi said, the more we drink the nectar of Srimad Bhagavatam, it will change our lives in inconceivable ways. Yes, very, very true. We should hear Bhagavatam daily to end our material existence. Very good. Definitely. Srimad Bhagavatam is non-different from Sri Krishna. Chapters are broken down to represent his body. Yes. And the more we remember this fact that Krishna and the Bhagavatam are non-different, people are searching for God in their life. And we have Krishna in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam in our life by Srila Prabhupada's mercy. God's conception is here explained distinctively further as absolute truth. Correct. There's a difference between God and the absolute truth. Absolute truth is the ultimate. Prabhupada uses the word samam bonam, the ultimate. God has only a fraction of the rasas. Absolute truth has all the relationships and rasas. Hare Krishna Prabhu. By this continuous hearing and association, we're learning all the time to stay humble and insignificant, appreciate that Srila Prabhupada and the devotees have given us, Srimad Bhagavatam, etc. Yes, when we, Shamananda Prabhu, when we stop hearing, that is when you will find that we start experiencing obstacles. When we constantly hear daily, Srila Prabhupada will constantly remind us of our position, Krishna's position, the material nature's position. In that way, we can stay sheltered and protected. Very good. Shama says, Srimad Bhagavatam is not for a selected group, it is for the entire human race. Yes. In some purports, Srila Prabhupada even says interplanetary. So it's even for the demigods, and everybody is living in all other planets. Soon, the devotees will, in the future, the devotees will even go preach in other planets. Srimad Bhagavatam is like a ripened fruit with no peel and seed. We must drink the nectar. Yes, thank you very much, Sukadeva Goswami. So thank you very much for your feedback. Let us now hear. Okay, so one more. Sometimes devotees find their devotional service mundane and routine, thus making their vows weaken. So hearing Srimad Bhagavatam strengthens our vows and our Krishna consciousness. Very true. If we hear properly, after the first 9, we will become God realized. Yes. And the question is hearing, or the trick is hearing properly. And we will have plenty opportunity to try to master this art of hearing. Pinprick in life of society, root cause of problems is our forgetfulness of Krishna. Definitely. And Srimad Bhagavatam has descended, has arrived to remind us. Krishna has come to remind us about him. Wherever Srimad Bhagavatam is recited, Krishna is present. Thank you so much for all your feedback. So, when the Lord appears as a fish, we call that Matsya Avatar. When the Lord appears as a boar, we call that Vara Avatar. When the Lord appears as a swan, we call that Hamsa Avatar. When the Lord appears as a horse, that is called Hayagriva Avatar. When the Lord appears as a demigod, Vamanadev or Upendra. And when the Lord appears as a human being in his original form, that is Krishna. And when the Lord appears as Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, that is called Grantha Avatar. So these are all different forms, manifestations of the Lord for our benefit. Matsya Avatar is for the fish. All the fish in the ocean, they get blessings and benefited by Matsya Avatar. So all the different incarnations is explained that Krishna appears in every incarnation. And Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita are Krishna's appearances in this world in the form of Grantha, book. And generally a book is given to share knowledge, to share wisdom, to help. So this is the best of all books, Grantha Avatar. Srimad Bhagavatam is relevant and satisfy the hankerings of the learned. So Srimad Bhagavatam is actually for everyone. It's not just for those who are suffering, but it's also for those who are learned. The Paramhamsas, the great souls, the devotees, they also relish the glories in Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam mitigates the suffering of people. It's the boat to cross over material existence. It's all auspicious for the time of death. It presents the ideal aspirations for all. If everyone has different aspirations, what we want in this world. Srimad Bhagavatam is guiding us of the ideal aspirations. It purifies the heart and reveals Shri Krishna. So these are some of a few more glories of Srimad Bhagavatam, of its unlimited potency and unlimited glories. Srimad Bhagavatam is eternal, but it comes into this world, as you said, a Grantha avatar, just like many of the avatars, they're all eternal. Majority of the eternal. There are some temporary avatars that manifest and unmanifest, but majority of the avatars are eternal. That means they have their eternal abode. Lord Nrsingadev, he has his eternal abode. And at an appropriate time, he descends to this world, performs his pastimes, and returns with his devotees to his abode. So Bhagavatam also is eternal. And Bhagavatam appears through different acharyas, different teachers. So, for example, Uddhava received Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam. Mother Devahuti received Bhagavatam. Lord Brahma, which is generally very well known. Lord Brahma received Bhagavatam, who then gave it to Narad Muni, and Narad Muni gave it to Vyas, and we see Narad Muni also gives it to many other devotees, like Dhruva Maj, the Prachatas, etc. Srimad Bhagavatam is given to Sankarshan, who then gives it to Lord Shiva. So Balaram gives it to Lord Shiva and Sanat Kumar and the sages. And Bhagavatam is also then given to Rishabdev. So in this way, Bhagavatam appears in this world, and you'll see when we go through the Bhagavatam, sometimes you'll find the speaker relating Bhagavatam according to these different ways or different personalities. So Srimad Bhagavatam is compared to a lamp, and like the lamp in the darkness, it illuminates. So similarly, in the darkness of this age, to see Krishna, Bhagavatam is like the lamp. Bhagavatam is also like the sun. Just like the sun destroys the misconceptions of demons and gives joy to devotees. When the sun rises, it's explained the thieves dissipate, and the citizens in the world they rise. So like that, Bhagavatam destroys the misconception of demons and gives rise to the devotees, or gives joy to the devotees. Then the Bhagavatam is also like a ripened fruit, which gives the highest taste, rasa, of pure devotional service. And Srimad Bhagavatam is also like Mohini Murti. Mohini Murti is the incarnation of Krishna, and she was distributing the nectar only to the demigods and not to the demons. She was deceiving the demons. So similarly, Srimad Bhagavatam is like Mohini Murti. Those who are devotees, they can access, they can get the nectar. And those who are not devotees, if they open Bhagavatam, they will not get, the proper result, the proper result from Srimad Bhagavatam. So, overview of the first canto. We find the first canto generally, or it's focusing on these four aspects: Narada, and it's introducing Narad Muni and Vyasadeva and their discussion. It's introducing Krishna in Hastinapur and Dwarka. We're going to hear about Parikshit's birth and the Pandavas renouncing, and then the final section is going to be about Parikshit Maharaj. So in detail, this first canto has 19 chapters, and briefly we'll just go through these 19 chapters. As we explained, there's basically four themes that are running through this first canto. And Srimad Bhagavatam is it's about pastime stories, leelas that are there, factual leelas that happen not only in this universe but also in other universes. And with those leelas, with those pastimes, there's also very, very important instructions that we can get from them. So it starts off with the first chapter with Sutta Goswami in Namisharanya with the sages, and we're going to hear what the sages are doing and the questions, 6 main questions they present right at the beginning of Kali Yuga for us. And then we're going to hear from Vyasadeva. So we hear about Vyasadeva, how he compiled all the Vedas, and after compiling the Vedas, the Puranas, the Mahabharata, still he was not satisfied. And Vyasadeva then appears, his spiritual master Narad Muni appears to him, explains to him why he's not satisfied. And the most important reason that he's not satisfied is because he gave all the Vedas, the Puranas, Mahabharata, but he did not give Krishna directly. He did not sufficiently glorify Krishna. And we'll talk about that today as well. And then Narad Muni describes his life story in chapter 6. So that's generally the introduction of Narad Muni and Vyasadeva. Then Krishna's appearance. Krishna appears. We find Krishna's appearance on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Krishna is now leaving from Hastinapur to Dwarka, and Queen Kunti offers her prayers. We're going to hear about Bhishmadev's leaving this world and Krishna appearing to him. Krishna then leaves, and he appears in Dwarka. Then we're going to hear about Krishna's leaving this world. At the same time, appearance of Parikshit Maharaj and how he's saved. We're going to hear about Vidura, and he's preaching to his brother Dhritarashtra to leave and to renounce. We're going to hear about the ill omens when Krishna left this world. Yudhishthir, Maharaj, and Bhima, they see ill omens because they receive the knowledge from Arjuna that Krishna has left this world, and then the Pandavas renounce this world and leave. And then finally, the last section, we're going to hear about this age of Kali Yuga, how Maharaj Parikshit, as the ruler of this planet, he finds a king, a Sudra, disguised as a king, destroying or breaking the legs of the bull, Dharma the bull, and Bhumi in the form of cow. And then Parishima chastises Kali, the age of Kali, but Kali surrenders. We're going to hear how much Parikshit and his interaction with a sage, who then and then he gets cursed, and finally he's cursed to die within 7 days. He then renounces, meets Sukadev Goswami, and we then get the blessings of Srimad Bhagavatam. So the first canto, we're going to look at just a breakdown of the first 3 chapters. Today we're going to cover the prelude, which is verses 1 to 3. Then in the first 3 chapters, it's basically Sudha Goswami's answers to the 6 questions of the sages of Namisharanya. So the sages ask 6 questions, and Sudha Goswami would briefly answer those, and then their answers in different parts of Srimad Bhagavatam. So these 6 questions, question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they are broken down into, the first question is discussing bhakti, second is the Lord's appearance, and the third is the Lord's disappearance. And we'll get into details as we go through Srimad Bhagavatam. So today we're going to cover the prelude, which is the first 3 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam. So the prelude, verses 1 to 3. Srimad Bhagavatam, first chapter has 23 verses in this first chapter. And first 3 verses, verse 1 is covering the definition of the absolute truth. Second verse is covering the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam and actual religion. And the third verse is covering an invitation to relish Srimad Bhagavatam. Then 4 and 8 is the sages that glorify Sutta Goswami, and 9 to 23, the sages describe and the condemned state of Kali Yuga people, and are 6 questions expressing their eagerness to hear. So all Vedic knowledge is contained in these first 3 verses. And these first 3 verses are very, very important. They break down all knowledge which is in the Vedas. All the knowledge in the Vedas can be categorized into Sambandha Gyan, Abhidheya, and Prayojana. Sambandha Gyan means our relationship with Krishna, with the absolute truth. Abhidheya is the process that we practice to revive that relationship. And Prayojana is the goal, pure love of Krishna. So there's 3 beautiful verses quoted from Chaitanya Charitamrita, which describes these 3 different sections. So Sambandha Gyan, Chaitanya Radasa Musi, Chaitanya Radasa Musi, Tandra Dasare Das. I am the servant of Lord Chaitanya, a servant of Lord Chaitanya. I'm a servant of Lord Chaitanya and a servant of his servants. So this is our ultimate relationship. Even though we are related with Krishna, but really our relation with Krishna is we are servant of the servant of the servant of those who are servants of Krishna. Then Abhidheya, Dasa Aparada Yena, Hridaya Na Pashe, Kripa Kara Mahaprabhu, Maji Namarase. O Mahaprabhu, please be merciful to me so that the 10 offenses never touch my heart, and I can always remain absorbed in the ras of the holy name. So the essence of all devotional practices to revive our eternal relationship with Krishna as the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna is the chanting the holy name, as well as other devotional activities. But chanting the holy name is the prime activity. And then the goal, Prema Dana Vina Vyartha Daridra Jivana, Dasakari Vetana Mora Deha Premadhana. Without love of God, my life is useless. Therefore, I pray that you accept me as your servant and give me the salary of ecstatic love of God. So this is beautiful verses focusing on Sambandha, Abhidheya, and Prayojana. Now, each of these three categories also has an Acharya. So Srila Sanatana Goswami is the Acharya of Sambandha, Srila Rupa Goswami is the Acharya of Abhidheya, and Sri Raghunath Das Goswami is our Acharya for Prayojan. And their books, their shastras, the scriptures that they have penned down and given to this world is focusing on these different subject matters. So Sanatana Goswami, his scripture is basically focusing on giving us knowledge about our relationship with Krishna. Rupa Goswami's scriptures is therefore giving us Abhidheya, helping us on this path of Abhidheya. And Raghunath Das Goswami, his writings are there to help us on on Prayojan. We also have the deities. So Govind Madan Mohan, the deity of Sambandha is Madan Mohan. Prabhupada says our first business is to know Krishna and our relationship with him, which we can learn by worshipping Madan Mohan Vigraha. So Madan Mohan, by worshipping Madan Mohan, our Sambandha Gyan is solidified. Our relationship, knowledge of our relation with Krishna is solidified. And this is what's going to be given to us in the first verse. Then in the second verse, glorification with Bhagavatam, we're going to hear about Abhidheya. And the deity, Radha Govindaji, oops, am I still, let's see. Looks like it broke. Okay. Okay, let's go back. Okay, on YouTube, I think we lost the channel. I'm just logging in again. It's interesting that I got kicked out. Okay. Hare Krishna. Sorry about that. I guess technology kicked me out. So, okay, I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, you should be able to see my screen. Okay, just a sound check again. Everyone can hear me? All good? Right. Okay, YouTube, we should be okay. Yeah, there's 23 people. We should be okay. Thank you very much. So on YouTube, just see, you should be having, let's see. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Yep, you should be able to hear me now on YouTube as well. Okay, let us continue. So we were discussing the deities, Sambandha, Abhidheya, and Prayojana. The deities of Sambandha Gyan is Madan Mohan. Deities for Abhidaya is Radha Govindaji, and Radha Govindaji accepts service and gives inspiration for increasing surrender on the path of Bhakti Yoga. And the Gopinath deity is Krishna as master and protector of the gopis. The totally surrendered devotees, Gopinath deity represents Prayojan Tattva. So we're going to now cover the first verse. We'll recite it again. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadyasya Yatonvayad Itaratas Charte Swabhignaswarat Tene Brahma Hidaya Dikavaye Muyanti Yatsuraya Tejo Varimrudam Yatha Vinimayo Yatra Trisargom Mrisha Damna Svena Sada Nirastakuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi. O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisance unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primal cause of all causes of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, as one is bewildered by the illusory representation of water seen in fire, or land seen on water. Only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of material nature, appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existent in a transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representation of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. So the Srimad Bhagavatam starts off with this beautiful verse. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj spoke on this verse for 3 months. And we can see Srila Prabhupada, when Srila Prabhupada went to the West, he took the first canto in 3 parts. Srila Prabhupada did not know how long he's going to live. So he decided to put everything in the first canto. And Srila Prabhupada was elderly, so he decided, let me put everything in the first 3 verses. So in the first 3 verses, if we really absorb the first 3 verses from a Sambandha Gyan perspective, from a knowledge perspective, we can understand the whole of Krishna consciousness. So it's a very, very important verse, and especially the first 3 verses are extremely important. It's laying the foundation. This verse is especially the first line, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. If we understand the background, Srila Vyasadeva had compiled all the Vedic teachings, the Vedas, the Puranas, the Mahabharata, everything was given. Yet he felt dissatisfied. That's a very instructive lesson. No matter what we have in this world, if we don't have Krishna, we will not be satisfied. Vyasadeva came, chastised, Narad Muni came and chastised Srila Vyasadeva that you really cheated people by giving them karma kanda, jnana kanda. You've given them 96% of the Vedas is directing towards mundane religiosity, and you've cheated them. Give them Krishna. So therefore, glorify the supreme absolute truth. And this is how Srimad Bhagavatam came. So Srila Vyasadeva, when he starts Srimad Bhagavatam, he immediately establishes who is this book about? And he says, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So the first line is really focusing on the subject matter for this whole Srimad Bhagavatam. 18,000 verses are focused on glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. And Srila Vyasadeva also, he starts the verse with Janmad Yasayaton, which is actually a verse from Vedanta Sutra, because Srimad Bhagavatam is the natural commentary of the Vedanta Sutra. The purport that Srila Prabhupada gives is very, very extensive. I'm going to go through some of the important instructions from the purport as well. Srimad Bhagavatam, as we mentioned last week, is a very special scripture. It's special in many ways, and we mentioned one of the ways is in terms of its structure and the meters that is used. So you'll see, for example, in Bhagavad Gita, there is the standard meter, which is 4 lines. Like here also there's 4 lines, but 8 syllables, making 32 in total. Right? Dhritarashtra vacha dharma kshetre kurukshetre samaveta yutsava mamaka pandavas cheva kim akurvata sanjay. So that's a standard verse, and majority of the Vedas is in that. It's called Anusupta or something like that. That's the terminology, Sanskrit terminology that's used as the meter that's used. And you'll see that in Bhagavad Gita also, for example, from first chapter to second chapter, the same meter is used, the standard default meter. And then when we come to something very important, for example, Arjuna, he surrenders to Krishna, he recognizes mistake and he surrenders. Karpanya dosa patasvabhava prachami tvam dharma samuda cheta yachreya shanichtam bruhitanme shishyasteham sarimam tvam papanyam. You see that meter changes. It's no more the standard 8 syllables in each line. So that meter changes, which means it's from a poetic or from a structure perspective, showing that something is changing, something here drastically happening. So Srimad Bhagavatam, from the first verse, it's presenting that it's unique. No other scripture starts with this specific meter, and you'll see immediately second verse has a different meter. The third verse, it's presenting its uniqueness. This first verse is in what we call in English call a play of a tiger. That's the meter that this verse is presented in. Now, there are many meanings to this verse. Srimad Bhagavatam is Krishna. Krishna is never Yovana. He's always eternally youthful. So you'll never know Krishna perfectly, completely. It's impossible. God is unlimited. Therefore, you can never know Krishna. Similarly, Srimad Bhagavatam is unlimited. You'll never know everything about Srimad Bhagavatam. One verse, Srila Bhakti Siddhant spoke for 3 months. According, the acharyas have given different meaning to this verse. Here, it's a verse that's very relevant. Srila Prabhupada presented, and the acharyas have also commented, similar to Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada has presented this meaning of this verse. But there are other meanings. For example, this verse basically could mean, and Shri Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur and Jiva Goswami has given different translations. It could mean simply only the pastimes of Krishna, depending on the Sanskrit words. Or it could mean Krishna, glorifying Krishna and the residents of Vrindavan, Srimati Radhavani. So there are different meanings. We're going to be focusing on the meanings that Srila Prabhupada has given us, because that is the medication that we need from the expert physician, Srila Prabhupada. So this verse is establishing the absolute truth. Prabhupada in his purport begins that people are inquisitive. People want to know the source of the source of creation. People want to know who that source is. And this verse is establishing without any ambiguity, O my Lord, Sri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Sri Krishna. Why? Because he is the absolute truth. And he is the primal cause of all causes of creation, sustenance, destruction of manifested universe. So the source of everyone, the source of everything is Krishna. And there is no source and there is no truth beyond Krishna. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna makes the same points. Sarvasya amata sarva parvatate itvi maja bhajanti mam. That I'm the source of all spiritual and material worlds. There is no truth superior to me. Many verses Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita. So here also Srila Vyasadeva is confirming that point, that no other personality but Krishna is the source of every other expansion or expansion of expansion, every form of Krishna, every manifestation of Krishna. So the absolute truth, as we said, is the source of everything, Janmadhyasyata. And in this verse, there are 7 characteristics that are described. That the absolute truth is the primal cause of all causes. The absolute truth is fully cogniscient. He is independent, Swarat. So he's Abhigna and Swarat. He's the enlightener. He enlightens Lord Brahma in the heart. He is the bewilderer. In this material world, everyone is bewildered by Krishna's potencies and energies. He's the factual basis, and he's in the eternal spiritual world. So these are 7 characteristics of Krishna, the absolute truth. This specific verse and the purport, Prabhupada is establishing that the source of everything is a person. Therefore, Prabhupada used this word, the personality of Godhead. Krishna, of all the personalities, Krishna is the supreme personality. And therefore, obeisance, Prabhupada writes, obeisance unto the personality of Godhead, Vasudeva directly indicates Lord Shri Krishna, who is the divine son of Vasudeva and Devaki. Vasudeva or Lord Shri Krishna is the cause of all causes. Everything that everything that exists emanates from the Lord. Prabhupada then also writes, Vyasadeva compiled all Vedic literatures containing the 4 divisions of the Vedas and the Vedanta Sutra or Brahma Sutra, the Puranas, the Mahabharata, and so on. But nevertheless, he was not satisfied. His dissatisfaction was observed by his spiritual master, and thus Narad advised him to write on the transcendental activities of Lord Shri Krishna. These transcendental activities are described specifically in the 10th canto of this work. But in order to reach the very substance, one must proceed gradually by developing knowledge of the categories. So this is also a very, very important point, that we have to develop knowledge of the different categories. So even though I said we're associating with Srimad Bhagavatam and not using our intelligence, we need to use our intelligence to learn the knowledge that is presented in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, for example, in this first verse, the knowledge is that the source of everything, Janmadhyasyatan, the cause of all causes, that supreme personality is Shri Krishna. No other personality falls in that category as the source. Sometimes you'll find people misunderstand Vishnu to be the source, but actually Vishnu is not the source. Vishnu is an expansion of Krishna. The different categories of knowledge, the different cantos that we're going to go through, they're going to share with us the glories, the greatness of Krishna, how he creates this creation, all his different energies, etc. And the more we hear about the absolute truth's energies, his powers, his potencies, his abilities, his qualities, it will inspire within us more and more the desire to surrender. So that is what the different cantos are going to do. They're going to shed light in relation to Krishna, and the knowledge in relation to Krishna, so that we can be more and more inspired to surrender as we recognize Krishna's greatness, Krishna's position, Krishna's potencies. Okay, so that's why we systematically go through each canto step by step. Just like we mentioned, seeing a deity of the Lord, we start from the lotus feet and then we systematically move up. Prabhupada in the purport shares with us, the author of Srimad Bhagavatam gives a direct answer to such inquiries. he says that Lord Shri Krishna is the origin of all creations. Prabhupada talks about how people are inquisitive, like the scientists. They want to know. They say everything came from a big bang. Bhagavatam does not agree with that. Srila Vyasadeva does not agree with that. Why? Because even a big bang means there's an explosion. Somebody has to create that explosion. Somebody has to, accumulate or assimilate, get the dynamite. Somebody has to trigger it. It doesn't just happen on its own. So our source is, or our information is that Krishna is the origin of creation. Then Prabhupada says the personality of Godhead is also a similar living being, and he is an individual as are the other living beings. But the Supreme Lord, as the supreme living being, has the greatest intelligence, and he possesses the supermost inconceivable energies of different varieties. So this is Krishna's position. We all have some minute little intelligence, some abilities, but that person who has the greatest intelligence, who possesses the most inconceivable energies of different types in unlimited quantities, that is Bhagavan. We know Prabhupada gave us the definition of Bhagavan by Parasar Muni, that person who owns all wealth, all beauty, all renunciation, all fame, all power, all strength, all knowledge, all wealth, etc. So that person, he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna. Srila Vyasadeva therefore gives the reader the chance to gradually develop spiritual realization before actually relishing the essence of the pastimes of the Lord. Therefore, he purposely invokes Gayatri Mantra, Dhimahi. This Gayatri Mantra is meant for spiritually advanced people. When one is successful in chanting the Gayatri Mantra, he can enter into the transcendental position of the Lord. One must therefore acquire Brahmanical qualities and be perfectly situated in the quality of goodness in order to chant the Gayatri Mantra successfully, and then attain to the stage of transcendental realization, then attain to the stage of transcendental realizing the Lord, his name, his fame, his qualities, and so on. In this verse, Srila Vyasadeva is invoking the Gayatri, and it's explained that he's invoking the Gayatri in plural, means he's encouraging all of us. Let us all meditate upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Dhimahi. So he's encouraging us, directing us to who the Supreme Absolute Truth is, and to glorify that Supreme Lord and meditate on him. Srila Vyasadeva says herein that the manifested internal potency is real, whereas the external manifested energy in the form of material existence is only temporary and illusory, like the mirage in a desert. In the desert, the mirage, there is no actual water. So in the first, Srila Vyasadeva beautifully gives this point that the material world is like a mirage, and you cannot get water in mirage. It's even though water exists somewhere else, but you're not going to find it in the desert. Or even if you get a little water, that water is not going to satisfy you. It's like if you get few droplets of water, it's not going to satisfy you. So this material world is not a place where the soul can become satisfied. We need to direct our attention to that Supreme Absolute Truth who is eternally residing in his spiritual abode. The chief engineer of a complicated construction does not personally take part in the construction, but he knows every nook and corner because everything is done under his direction. He knows everything about the construction, both directly and indirectly. Similarly, the personality of Godhead, who is the supreme engineer of this cosmic creation, knows every nook and corner, although affairs are being carried out by demigods. Just as we know a little about our body, if I'm experiencing pain or if I'm hungry, I can understand, okay, I'm hungry or I'm experiencing pain. Krishna, he understands every aspect of this creation because he's the chief engineer. He's the source. Therefore, he knows directly and indirectly, he knows everything about this creation. That's the quality of abhigna. He's fully cognition. There is nothing in this material world that Krishna is not aware of. He knows. And he's also involved directly and indirectly. So, for example, Krishna, He's the source of creation. Without him, there is no creation. But he doesn't directly create. He creates via the agency of his expansions, the Purusha avatars, which will be explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Mahavishnu, etc. Garbhadak Sai Vishnu, Karanaka Sai Vishnu, and Kshirodak Sai Vishnu. So different expansions of the Lord that facilitates the creation. And then the demigods, they also help in this affair. Therefore, the absolute truth is simultaneously one and different. Nothing is absolutely equal with the absolute truth, but at the same time, nothing is independent of the absolute truth. Because we are coming from the Supreme Lord. In Sri Shopanishad explained, Om Purnamada Purnamidam. Krishna is complete, and all complete units, both the material world and the living entities, come from Krishna. We are interdependent. We are not independent of Krishna. We are dependent, and we cannot live in isolation. The example is given like my fingers. The fingers, they are connected to the hand. So if the finger is dislocated from the hand, it doesn't have any value. Its value is as good as when it's connected to the hand. Similarly, we also, and the material creation, everything, when it's connected to the Supreme Lord in service to Him, which is going to explain, it will be explained in the second verse, then there is value. One may argue that Brahma, being the original living being, could not be inspired because there was no other living being at that time. Herein it is stated that Supreme Lord inspired the secondary creator Brahma in order that Brahma could carry out his creative functions. So the supreme intelligence behind all creation is the absolute Godhead Shri Krishna. Tene Brahma Hiraya Adikaveya. Lord Brahma inspired, Krishna inspired Brahma in the heart in terms of how to create. In this slok, the particular words Abhigna and Swarat are significant. These two words distinguish the Supreme Lord from all other living entities. No other living entity is either Abhigna or Swarat. Totally, completely independent and fully cognition. Abhigna is fully cognition, and Swarat means completely independent. Only Krishna has these two traits specifically mentioned here in this verse. Whenever man neglects the authority of the Lord, nature and her laws are there to penalize them. So here we also have to heed. If we are suffering, why are we suffering? Because we've neglected the authority of the Supreme Lord. And therefore, nature will penalize, nature will punish us. As soon as we abide by the Srimad Bhagavatam and aspire to follow the direction given by Srimad Bhagavatam, given by Srila Vyasadeva and the sages, then you find that that is how we become free from all miseries. So as we mentioned, Srila Prabhupada gives a very extensive purport. Another name for God is Asamodra, which means that no one is equal to or greater than him. Param Satyam, or the supreme truth, is he who has no equal or superior. This is confirmed in the Shruti mantras. It is said that before the creation of the material universe, there existed the Lord only, who is the master of everyone. That Lord instructed Brahma in Vedic knowledge. That Lord has to be obeyed in all respects. Anyone who wants to get rid from material entanglement must surrender unto him. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Krishna Prabhupada in the purport also talks about the principal name of the Supreme Absolute Truth, which is Krishna. So this name Krishna is also very, very unique. It's the principal name of Krishna. When Srimati Radhavani is separated from Krishna, or separated from our beloved Supreme Lord Krishna, she cries out, "Oh Krishna." So that name of Krishna is very special to Srimati Radhavani because, as Prabhupada says, if any nomenclature name can be given to Krishna, to the Supreme Absolute Truth, it is by the name Krishna. Then Sridhar Swami points out that there is reference to Bhagavatam in many of the oldest Puranas. Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur specifically deals with the original and pure sex psychology, adiras, devoid of all mundane inabilities. The whole material creation is moving under the principle of sex life. In modern civilization, sex life is the focal point of all activities. Wherever one turns his face, he sees sex life predominant. Therefore, sex life is not unreal. It's real. Its reality is experienced in the spiritual world. The material sex life is but a perverted reflection of the original fact. The original fact is in the absolute truth, and thus the absolute truth cannot be impersonal. Prabhupada brings this point about Adiras, which Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur speaks about in his commentaries, and this original pure sex psychology. And in the material world, this pleasure, this experience that people feel in the material world, sex life is the driving force of the material world. But because the material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world, what's highest in the material world is the beginning of the spiritual world. So this pleasure exists as the foundation of the spiritual world. It's not the all in all. There are pleasures far, far exalted and exceeding the experience which is experienced of mundane sex life in the material world. But that adiras, that experience is not false. It exists. But right now we are experiencing the perverted reflection of that. Whereas the absolute the absolute truth has this adiras in its pure form in the spiritual world. This Srimad Bhagavatam will gradually elevate the unbiased reader to the highest perfectional stage of transcendence. It will enable him to transcend three modes of material nature, fruit of action, speculative philosophy, and the worship of functional deities as inculcated in Vedic verses. So Prabhupada concludes and tells us this is basically how we will progress by the mercy of Srimad Bhagavatam. By the knowledge that Bhagavatam is giving us, we will be able to rise above all different mundane forms of worship and ultimately achieve the highest perfection of transcendence. Now, when we're hearing the knowledge that is shared in Srimad Bhagavatam, we have to recognize and accept that we may have doubts. We may not accept the knowledge that is given to us by Srimad Bhagavatam. So, for example, here Srimad Bhagavatam is establishing who the supreme absolute truth is. Now, for some of us, it's very easy. We accept and we're convinced. For others, there may be doubts. And those doubts are like big boulders that may be blocking us. If we do not clarify those doubts, it's not bad to have doubts, but it's dangerous to not clarify those doubts. Now, in some instances, when we read the knowledge that is given in Srimad Bhagavatam, there may be statements that are far beyond our comprehension. For example, there are fishes, there are fish that eat whales. There are birds that fly from planet to planet. So, there may be certain statements that are made in the Bhagavatam that you think impossible. I mean, how can you have these things? If there are situations like that, my suggestion is you put that on the back burner. Keep it on the back. It's there, but leave it at the back and continue with your practice and devotional service. And over time, those doubts will be clarified. But otherwise, there are some important statements like here we are hearing this first verse and many other verses, which we need to accept, clarify our doubts so that those doubts will be clarified and the proper foundation of knowledge will be established systematically, category by category, as we go through each verse and canto. And as that knowledge unfolds, that knowledge will then direct us on how to act. If Krishna is the absolute truth, he is the supreme cause of all causes, then naturally we, being part and parcel, we are source coming from him. Naturally, we have a relationship with him. So now we can start practicing our day-to-day life with knowledge of Krishna in our life. We can take this verse and try to practically see how can I apply this verse in my life in a practical way. So, for example, Krishna is abhigna, is fully cognition. If he's fully cognition, we can pray to him that, my Lord, you are aware of everything. You know my heart. You know my desires. You know my weaknesses. Therefore, please, I beg you, I pray to you, please help me. So in this way, we can use the different statements, different instructions that are given to us in a practical way when we have this knowledge. Srimad Bhagavatam, it is described, teaches us in 3 different ways. There's a beautiful verse, Veda Puranam Kavyam Cha Prabhur Mitram Priyevacha Bodhayantiti Prabhus Trivad Bhagavatam Puna. The learned say that a Veda instructs like a master, a Purana instructs like a friend, and poetry instructs like a lover. But Srimad Bhagavatam instructs like all 3 of them. So Srimad Bhagavatam is instructing like a master, telling us what we must do. It's instructing like a friend, understanding our situation and helping us through our journey, and also like a lover, compassionate lover. Okay, so that is, in essence, the first verse. Um, as we mentioned, we can spend days and days on each word, expanding it, discussing it, but due to time, we will just leave it at that. So then the second verse in Srimad Bhagavatam, which is now discussing Abhidheya, the process of practice of how to connect with the absolute truth. Dharma projita Kaitavatra paramo nitma saranam sataham vedyam vastavatra vastu shivadam tarpatrayo mulanaham Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kim va pare Ishvaraha Sadhya Hridya Varudyate Tatra Kritibi Shushrushubistakshanat. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavad Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by this great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of the Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. So very wonderful verse. Dharma projita kaitavatra paramo nit matsaranam satam. Now we will discuss this the statement. Srimad Bhagavatam is now, Srila Vyasadeva is establishing Srimad Bhagavatam's position. What is Bhagavatam presenting? And Bhagavatam is presenting the highest truth, the absolute knowledge of the absolute truth. It's completely rejecting all mundane religiosity. So that is the position of this wonderful scripture. Dharma projito kaitavatra paramo nirmatsaranam satam. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavad Puran propounds the highest truth, which is undesirable, which is understandable by those devotees who are pure in heart. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada he quotes the same, in fact, the same verse is quoted in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adilila 191, and Prabhupada also gives an extensive purport there. And he says in Srimad Bhagavatam, a distinction between real religion and pretentious religion has been clearly made. According to this original and genuine commentation on the Vedanta Sutra, there are numerous pretentious faiths that pass as religion, but neglect the real essence of religion. Real religion of a living entity is its natural inborn quality, whereas pretentious religion is a form of niscience that artificially covers a living entity's pure consciousness under certain unfavorable conditions. Real religion lies dormant when artificial religion dominates from the mental plane. A living being can awaken this dormant religion by hearing with a pure heart. So, what's real religion? Prabhupada says real religion means to know God and love God. So, I need to hear about Krishna, learn about Krishna, and love Krishna. And religion, Prabhupada also says, is the intrinsic nature of the soul. It's the inborn quality of the soul. It cannot be taken away from the soul, like sweetness in sugar or heat and light in fire. You cannot take sweetness out of sugar. If you take sweetness out of sugar, it's no more sugar. Similarly, religion, which is to know God and love God, pure loving service to the Supreme Lord, that is true religion. Anything else that propounds, that motivates, that encourages, that presents the living end to do anything else within this material world, maybe fruitive activities, maybe you know, striving for material wealth, etc. No matter what it is, worshiping the different demigods, these are distractions and deviations, which Bhagavatam is calling cheating religion, kaitava. So, an example of projita kaitava, cheating religion. In the Vedas, there are four main goals given. And the four main goals are dharma, artha, kam, and moksha in that sequence. Right? Dharma means mundane religiosity. You practice religion to get wealth. So the Vedas are directing people that you want to enjoy, no problem. You need wealth. To get wealth, perform dharma. Perform this ritual, perform this puja, perform this prayer, worship this demigod, and you get wealth. When you get wealth, you can then get sense gratification using that wealth. So generally, mundane religiosity, dharma comes first, then artha, then kama, then moksha. But if you see in this picture, here you see artha, then kama, then dharma. So the sequence is mixed, right? This is an aspect of kaitava, cheating religion. People will take things, people will change things for their own mundane motivation. Now, even though these four goals are given in the Vedas, ultimately, fourth one is liberation. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has described Prema Pumarta Mahan. The greatest goal is pure devotional service, pure loving service to Krishna, which Srimad Bhagavatam is going to describe. And as Prabhupada is describing the purport, that is what needs to be revived. That is what we need to strive for. So every form of cheating religion is completely given up. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna also says, Sarva Dharman Parityaja, abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender to me. So the same point is here. And who can actually understand this Bhagavad Puran, this truth that is described in the Bhagavad Puran? They are Nirmat Saranam Satam, those who are pure in heart. Nirmat Saram also means those who are free from envy. So in Srimad Bhagavatam 791, these six enemies of Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, Mada, and Matsarya described: lust, anger, greed, illusion, pride, and envy. And envy is very deeply rooted. The reason we're in this material world is because of envy. The fact that we have a material body means we envious. Envious of what? Envious of Krishna's position. Why must Krishna be God? Why should I serve Krishna? So that envy, I want to enjoy, separate from Krishna. That envy separates us from Krishna, and we are in this material world. And once we envious of Krishna in this material world, we begin to envy everyone else in this material world. Why must they have more? Why must she have this? So in this way, we begin to envy. We need to become purified of that envy. And how do you become purified of that envy? Simply by associating with the Bhagavatam, we become purified. by accepting the knowledge that Bhagavatam is giving us, we become purified. By acting on that knowledge, which is to surrender to the Supreme Lord in devotional service, we become free from that envy. Love, pure devotional service, pure loving service is the most powerful way to eradicate that envy. And once we connect with this absolute truth, the source of everything, then you'll see that automatically you will connect to everyone else and everything else in a harmonious way, in alliance, in allegiance and alliance with Krishna's wish. And you will also be able to reciprocate with all the part and parcels and all of Krishna's energies in a way that is pleasing to Krishna. If we separate and take Krishna completely out of the formula, then we will suffer and be punished in this world. Few statements from Srila Prabhupada's purports. In the Vedas, the above mentioned 4 activities are prescribed in the regulative way so that there will not be any undue competition for sense gratification. But Srimad Bhagavatam is transcendental to all these sense gratificatory activities. It is purely transcendental literature which can be understood only by the pure devotees of the Lord who are transcendental to competitive sense gratification. In a material conception, one falsely thinks himself the lord of all he surveys, and therefore he is always troubled by the threefold miseries of life. And the threefold miseries are suffering caused by the body and mind, suffering caused by other living entities, and suffering caused by natural calamities. But as soon as one comes to know his real position as transcendental servant, he at once becomes free from all miseries. As long as the living entity is trying to master material nature, there is no possibility of his becoming servant of the Supreme. Service to the Lord is rendered in pure consciousness of one's spiritual identity. By service, one is immediately freed from material contamination. So you'll see this is what Bhagavatam is going to present, that we are eternal servants of Krishna, part and parcel of Krishna. We need to be connected to Krishna in devotional service in different relationships. The proper method of receiving this transcendental message is to hear it submissively. By challenging attitude, a challenging attitude cannot help one realize this transcendental message. One particular word is used herein for proper guidance. This word is shushru. One must be anxious to hear this transcendental message, and desire to sincerely hear is the first qualification. So Prabhupada is now giving us in the purport using this word shushru, shushru shadhanasya. We need to hear. We need to be anxious. I want to hear about Krishna. That desire to hear the supreme message of the Bhagavatam. This is the first qualification. As soon as we desire, because that intention is very important. Krishna is a person, so I can reveal my intention to Krishna. I can reveal my intention to the Bhagavatam. And in this way, as we mentioned, Bhagavatam is also our friend. We can speak to our friend. We can speak and reveal our mind and pray. And because Krishna is absolute truth and all powerful, he has all the potency and ability to help us. In the first 3 verses also, first in all the purports, Prabhupada touched on this point of one indifference. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to this world to also give this philosophy of Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva philosophy, inconceivable, one and different. All other acharyas have presented commentaries and given knowledge on the Vedic wisdom, and they've presented different parts of the philosophy systematically. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to complete the philosophy by Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva, inconceivably one and different. So Prabhupada writes, from Srimad Bhagavatam, one can come to know the substance, which is Krishna, the absolute truth, and Sri Krishna, as well as the categories, different expansions, different energies. The substance is the absolute truth, Supreme Lord, and all emanations are relative forms of energy. Nothing is apart from the substance, but at the same time, the energies are different from the substance. This conception is not contradictory. Srimad Bhagavatam explicitly from you Gates, this simultaneous one and different philosophy of the Vedanta Sutra, which begins with Janmadhyasya, Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1 Sutra. So to explain this one and difference, and you'll see in our philosophy, in the Bhagavatam philosophy, this point of one and difference. For example, Krishna, he's got unlimited energies. Those unlimited energies can be classified in three categories. Here we're comparing Krishna to be the sun. He's the source. The sun emits heat and light. So Krishna is like the sun, and the energies in the sun globe, that is compared to the internal energy. So all the energies that's contained in the sun globe within its circumference, that is the internal energy represented by Srimati Radharani. All forms of internal energies, there's different manifestations of these internal energies, are all in the sun globe, non-different from the sun. So therefore, Krishna, who's the source, the Shakti Man, and the internal energy, Krishna's energy, Shakti, they are, you could say that's the sun, right? They can not be separate. If you take heat and light, all the energy of the sun, and separate it, you don't get Krishna. So Krishna and the internal energy cannot be separated. They are one and different. Now, this marginal energy, they are like the sun rays that emit away from the sun towards the material energy. They have the same potency of the sun in terms of heat and light, but the potency is totally different. A small ray of sunlight cannot be compared to the sun, which is Krishna. So therefore, no living entity can become Krishna. The living entity is also marginal energy, which means between the sun and internal energy and external energy. And as those rays move further, coming in contact with the external energy, which is compared like a shadow, a reflection. So in the reflection, we can see the sun, we can see the heat, we can see the light, and there may also be some heat that we can experience, very little. But the reflection is not, we cannot get the same experience as with the actual sun and the energy coming from the sun. All the living entities, unfortunately, are swimming, jumping into the reflection, the shadow, and trying to experience the sun. But as Bhagavatam is explaining, they will never be satisfied. We need to turn towards the sun, turn towards the Supreme Lord, and move towards the Supreme Lord to engage in eternal service with the Supreme Lord. Prabhupada, there are like different analogies that we can give. For example, the sun, a spark coming from the fire and then falls on the earth, extinguishes. So we want to go back into the fire, back into Krishna's association. And then the last verse for today, verse 3. Nigama kalpataro galitam phalam sukha mukad amrita dravya samyutam pibata bhagavatam rasam ama al alayam muhur aho rasika bhuvi bhavuka. O expert and thoughtful man, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literature. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful, although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. So in this verse, we are hearing about the ultimate goal. When we in love with Krishna, we would not want to stop hearing about our beloved Lord. Just like in the material world, when people are infatuated by material love, they naturally want to be with each other. They want to hear about each other's qualities. Similarly, when we love Krishna, then we would want to hear the nectar of Bhagavatam. And for those souls who are in love with Krishna, these souls who are rasikas, they're relishing this rasa, which is pipata, which is like the pipata Bhagavatam rasam alayam, which is like uh, juice. This nectar is actually drunk through the ears, but it's described that this nectar is not eaten but drunk through the ears. In the purport, Prabhupada writes, in the two previous slokas, it has been definitely proved that the Srimad Bhagavatam is the sublime literature which surpasses all other Vedic literatures due to its transcendental qualities. And we read that this one scripture is sufficient for achieving perfection. It is transcendental to all mundane activities and mundane knowledge, because the second verse made it very clear that it kicks away all cheating religion, cheating knowledge, everything that diverts the soul, the living entity, Kaitava religion, anything that diverts the soul away from service to pure devotional service to Krishna is rejected. In this sloka, it is stated that Srimad Bhagavatam is not only a superior literature, but it is the ripened fruit of all Vedic literatures. In other words, it is the cream of all Vedic knowledge. Considering all this, patient and submissive hearing is definitely essential. With great respect and attention, one should receive the message and lessons imparted by Srimad Bhagavatam. So, very wonderful traits or qualities that are required to benefit from Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada says we have to be patient because it's 18,000 verses, 12 cantos. All right. So, if somebody looks at the shelf and says, wow, it's like so much to read, it doesn't matter. Take it step by step. However long it takes, try to associate nicely in a prayerful, submissive way. Hear Srimad Bhagavatam with respect, with attention, and try to absorb what we're reading, what we're learning. In this way, as we're hearing and going through verse by verse, as you're reading, make notes, try to absorb, try to learn the philosophical points that Bhagavatam is making. In this way, this will be eternally credited to you. It will be part of your psyche, your nature, and it will help you in your journey going forward. Right? We will never lose. There is no loss or diminution on this path. Simply by associating, we have this wonderful knowledge. Let us take advantage patiently, respectfully, and attentively. And this way, as Prabhupada is saying, we have to receive the message, so we hear, as well as learn the lessons that Bhagavatam is imparting. And we'll, as we go through the Srimad Bhagavatam, we'll see so many wonderful lessons of how to live in this world, what we should aspire for, what we should do, how we should not do things. Different lessons are learned through different devotees' experiences and pastimes. Regulated knowledge involves a gradual rising of the living entity to the spiritual platform. And the highest spiritual realization is knowledge that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the reservoir of all spiritual tastes, or rasas. Srila Prabhupada in the purport talks about the different rasas that are there, the 12 different rasas, and everybody's seeking, just like people want entertainment. But no entertainment in this material world will fully satisfy the soul. Why? Because we are coming from Krishna. He's our source. So really the source establishes the foundation of the rasa. And that means we had experience with that source. And that is what we're hankering for. Once we turn our attention to that source, then we get satisfaction, then we get fulfilled. And that's the treasure that Srimad Bhagavatam wants to give us. And we get that in association of those who are rasikas, those who are relishing Srimad Bhagavatam, like Srila Prabhupada, who's then sharing this with the whole world. In this sloka, it is definitely stated that spiritual rasa, which is relished even in the liberated stage, can be experienced in the literature of the Srimad Bhagavatam due to its being the ripened fruit of all Vedic knowledge. By submissively hearing this transcendental literature, one can attain the full pleasure of his heart's desire. But one must be very careful to hear the message from the right source. Srimad Bhagavatam is exactly received from the right source. It was brought by Narad Muni from the spiritual world and given to his disciple Sri Vyasadeva. And we have received it in disciplic succession through Srila Prabhupada. So here Prabhupada again is saying submissive hearing this transcendental literature. In Sanskrit, the parrot is known as sukha. When a ripened fruit is cut by the red beaks of such birds, its sweet flavor is enhanced. The Vedic fruit is mature and ripe in knowledge, is spoken through the lips of Srila Shukadeva Goswami, who is compared to the parrot not for his ability to recite Bhagavatam exactly as he heard it from his learned father, but for his ability to present the work in a manner that would appeal to all classes of men. It's an interesting science that if you have a mango fruit, for example, and a parrot comes and pecks on that mango fruit, it enhances the flavor. So like that, Sukadeva Goswami, who is actually Sukha, who is the parrot of Srimati Radharani, that was asked to stay when Krishna left this world. Sukha was asked to stay behind, so that Sukha, who then became Sukadeva Goswami, heard Srimad Bhagavatam, the glories of Krishna, and then spoke that. So Srimati Radharani's own parrot speaking the glories of Krishna to Maharaj Parikshit. And that is how we have got this wonderful glorification from the most exalted Sukadeva Goswami. Every living entity, beginning from Brahma, the firstborn living being within the material world, down to the insignificant ant, desire to relish some sort of taste derived from sense perception. This desire to enjoy, this desire to be happy. This is not wrong. We all have the desire, and it's proper to fulfill that. It's just that we don't know how to fulfill it. If you're going to fulfill those desires to be happy and enjoy by going into the shadow, just like if you have a reflection of that mango tree with mangoes and it's reflected into the shadow, it's reflected into the lake. It looks like a mango, but there's no substance, as the Bhagavatam has been describing. The substance is Krishna. So real pleasure is at the lotus feet of Krishna, service to Krishna. When we direct our attention to Krishna, that's where we can start experiencing real taste, real pleasure, real satisfaction. And that is what the Bhagavatam and the Acharyas are directing us to do. One should conclude, therefore, that the serious student of rasa should receive the message of Bhagavatam in the chain of disciplic succession from Srila Sukadeva Goswami, who describes Bhagavatam from its very beginning and not whimsically to satisfy the mundaners, who has very little knowledge in transcendental science. Srimad Bhagavatam is so carefully presented that a sincere and serious person can at once enjoy the ripened fruit of Vedic knowledge simply by drinking the nectarian juice through the mouth of Sukadeva Goswami or his bona fide representative. And that brings us to the end of our session today on the first 3 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam describing the Sambandha Gyan. Who is the Absolute Truth? It is none other than Shri Krishna, the son of Vasudeva, and son of Vasudeva, Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Then we heard in the second verse about the process of Abhideya, to reject all mundane processes, cheating religion, and simply engage in the process of devotional service. And then finally, to cultivate, to develop our pure loving service pure love to Krishna. And when we are in complete love with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we will also at that point want to drink constantly the nectarian glories of Krishna. So those who are conditioned souls, they can benefit from Srimad Bhagavatam by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, becoming purified in association of Bhagavatam by learning and practicing the knowledge that's given. And those who are liberated, they can also drink this nectar from Srimad Bhagavatam and relish it. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments that anyone has? We will take that. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, so there is one question here. By Prem Parayana Prabhu, please elaborate on Vedanta Sutra. Is it the summary of the Vedas and Srimad Bhagavatam natural commentary on the Vedanta Sutra? Yes. So Srila Vyasadeva, he compiled the Vedas, the four main Vedas, Rig Veda, Samaveda, Yajurveda, Atharva Veda. Then he took the Vedas and gave them Puranas, because the Vedas, they have knowledge all over the show. Okay, that's why you need the sages that have Shrutidhar memory. So that if you go to the sage and say, dear, Sadhu, I have this issue, they can immediately recollect from their memory and immediately they'll be able to tell you. But in Kali Yuga, because we lacked memory, then Srila Vyasadeva, to help us, took the Vedas, divided it, systematically gave the Puranas, then gave the Mahabharata, and he also gave the Vedanta Sutra. He gave the essence in sutra form. Aham Brahmasmi, Atata Brahma Jignasa, Tattvam Asi, that thou art, different things like that. So those are statements, that means conclusive statements. You have to unpack it. Srila Vyasadeva now gave Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the natural commentary of all the Vedanta Sutras. And therefore, just by learning the Srimad Bhagavatam, we know the Vedanta Sutras concisely, without any ambiguity. Okay, so Vedanta Sutra was given by Srila Vyasadeva, and his natural commentary as the author, he is giving commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. There are many other commentaries given by the different acharyas. Srila Vyasadeva also gave his own commentary. All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments anyone has on the subject matter that we have covered? 436, let's see. Mother Kalpana, please retype the question because of, or Jivananda, yeah, maybe somebody can retype that question, because remember, my chat will not go to there because I got kicked out. So if somebody can ask that question again. Or Mother Kalpana can. Was Srimad Bhagavatam recited by Radharani to Sukha and told to bring it to Kali Yuga? So Srimad Bhagavatam is the glorification of Supreme Absolute Truth. You could say that in the spiritual world, Srimati Radharani is speaking to Sukha, the glories of Krishna. And Sukha is hearing those glories. And those glories then become manifest in this world via now Krishna telling the Chaturshloki Bhagavatam, which we will cover in the Bhagavatam, to Lord Brahma, then Brahma speaking to Narada Muni speaking to Vyasadeva, Vyasadeva speaking to Sukadeva Goswami, and then that is also then manifested to Maharaj Parikshit. So, and as mentioned, Krishna can speak the Bhagavatam in different formats, in different verses, to different personalities. They all non-different from Bhagavatam. For example, Lord Brahma heard Srimad Bhagavatam in 4 seed verses. All 18,000 verses conclusion was condensed into 4 verses which Brahma understood. We've got 18,000 verses. In other yugas, in other kalpas, in other universes, there may be more. there may be less. Right? So yes, in essence, if you say Srimad Bhagavatam is the glorification of Krishna, then naturally Sukadeva Goswami, as the parrot, also came with that glorification coming from Srimati Radharani. Kindly share Srimad Bhagavatam's role in other sampradayas. So it's interesting that in some other sampradayas they will not. Okay, let me start again. In the bona fide sampradayas, so for example, remember I showed you the chart where Balaram, Anantashesh, Shankarshan spoke to the four Kumaras. He also spoke to Lord Shiva. That knowledge, they are acharyas of the sampradaya, the Shiva Rudra sampradaya and the four Kumara sampradaya. They then would give the Bhagavatam to their followers. So that's how the Bhagavatam is also coming down. The knowledge of the Bhagavatam is coming down in disciplic succession. The other sampradayas also give a commentary on the Bhagavatam, because the four sampradayas don't contradict each other. They may, because of their relationship with Krishna, they may see their Ishtadev. But in our line, where we're coming from Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya, our Ishtadev is the Supreme Absolute Truth, Krishna, and Srimati Radharani. And therefore, we see this knowledge with that also in mind. Okay. Thank you, Prabhu. You have answered. Okay, thank you. When Vyasadeva spoke to Narad Muni, was the Srimad Bhagavatam just spoken or retained in memory, or was it written at any point in time? If yes, would you know who wrote it? If not, does this mean that it was passed down from one person to the next to retain it was retained on memory or passed down? So when Vyasadeva spoke to Narad Muni, he spoke the knowledge. Narad Muni memorized it. Then Narad Muni went to Srila Vyasadeva and spoke to him. Vyasadeva also was able to retain it and memorize it. Okay. Now, Vyasadeva composed all the Vedas. He left out Srimad Bhagavatam, which in the sense of he composed the Bhagavatam, but as one of the 18 Puranas in the mode of goodness, but also aligned to the majority of the Vedas. After writing, he was not satisfied. That's when Narad Muni came again to him and chastised him. Narad Muni came and chastised him, and told him to go into meditation and see the Supreme Lord and now glorify, have Srimad Bhagavatam only glorification of the Supreme Absolute Truth, Shri Krishna. And then Vyasadeva then now compiles Bhagavatam. So before 5,000 years ago, all the Vedas were heard and remembered. There was no writing of the Vedas. Only 5,000 years ago, all the Vedic scriptures were actually written down, penned down, including the Bhagavatam. And since then, that knowledge has been coming down to us in disciplic succession. Hare Krishna Prabhu, when Vyasadeva spoke to Narad Muni, was the Srimad Bhagavatam just spoken? Was it the same? Yeah, that's the same question. Yes. Okay, I hope that clarified some of your questions. Good. Hare Krishna Prabhu. Vishnu is not the supreme. He is an expansion of an expansion. In the purport, Vyasadeva is also describing, Vasudev is also described as the cause of all causes. Why are the names Vishnu Tattva used interchangeably to describe the Supreme Lord Krishna? Yes. So there's Tattva means the essential truths. So there's three types of Tattvas. There's Vishnu Tattva, there is Shiva Tattva, and then there's Jiva Tattva. And then you get, Guru Tattva, different Shakti Tattva. So there's different Tattvas. So in terms of the living, in terms of the personalities, the Purushas, you got Vishnu Tattva. So all the incarnations, including Krishna, they fall in the category of Vishnu Tattva. Then you have Lord Shiva, who falls in his own category, Shiva Tattva. So Lord Shiva, he is compared to yogurt. He's a milk product, so he is in the category of Vishnu Tattva, but he falls in his own special category called Shiva Tattva, because he comes in contact with Maya Devi. And then the living entities are called Jiva Tattva. They marginal energy. Lord Shiva is not marginal, and no other Vishnu expansion is marginal. Okay, so then generally those are the categories of energies or tattvas. So Krishna, all the incarnations, they generally fall under Vishnu Tattva. And Bhagavatam is clarifying that who's the source, like when we come to the future chapters where all the incarnations are going to be described, then Bhagavatam will establish who's the source of all these Vishnu expansions or incarnations of avatars that fall into the category of Vishnu Tattva. So who's the source of all Vishnu Tattvas? And called the fountainhead, and that is Krishna. Jada Tattva, yes, the material energy, dead matter. It's called Jada Tattva. That will also be described in the future cantos. Third canto, second canto, we will come to that. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much.